All right, everybody, welcome to the first session of the Minnesota Brass History Academy. I think I'll hand it off to Cindy to really introduce that.
Show your Kelton's on. B's on.
Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the first of 3 conversations about the colorful history of Minnesota brass. We have a very fun event lined up to engage our friends, alumni, and recent members of the great organization. Today's format will be hosted by Kurt Schiebel and Jim Tarbucks. It's going to last about an hour, and a recording will be posted on our website. I will also put a survey in the chat box and hope that you can fill that out so that we can have some information for our records. We also invite you to be a part of a variety of other opportunities to socialize, learn, and teach. It's our desire to remain connected, to continue to grow and learn during the 2021 winter quarantine experience. The opportunities are sure to keep you interested and looking forward to the return of the marching arts activities. These programs will run from February until May 21. We are offering an education academy with lessons for members who would like to increase their musical performance experience. We will have a social hour, hopefully by the end of March, just to chat and keep in touch with each other. You're participating in the History Academy, the first of 3 series. And then finally, we hope to launch an Emerging Leaders Academy, which is training and what it takes to run a drum corps, and is meant to teach new and emerging members how to run an organization for the longevity of our corps. And finally, this activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a Minnesota State Arts Board operating support grant, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. I'm going to pick it up with just a few housekeeping Zoom things. So if you could please, if you're not one of the speakers today, if you could please mute your microphone so that we don't get any fun dogs barking or things like that, that would be fantastic. And I would also like to let you know that this is being recorded, so that if you are not comfortable being recorded, please turn your video off as well. It's entirely up to you, but this session is being recorded and will go on YouTube in the future. So if you don't want your face up, just go ahead and turn your video off. And if you're having problems with that, just let me know. You should be able to send me a message in chat and I can help you through that. And yeah, I think that's it. So I'll toss it to Jim.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. I think I know just about everybody on the list here. If you don't recognize my face, you surely will recognize my voice, because I've done a lot of announcing for the corps shows and marching band shows. Been on the board a couple of times, and really thrilled to be doing this. Cindy roped me into this about a month ago, so we're just gonna have a fun conversation and talk about the history of the corps. I don't know if this is the textbook you may recognize that I was using to take notes. Many of you took part in the production of that. Just to put a little bit of personal note here, that was the year that I got wrapped up with the corps when I first joined the board, doing a story about the 50th anniversary when I was at the Pioneer Press. And in all the improbable coincidences that you might guess, I don't know how many of you remember, I think he played baritone, a guy named Jerry Copy is one of my wife's employees. So I always get into her office. Jerry and I always have a chance to reminisce a little bit, and he can tell me how drum corps should be, and I try to bring him up to date. So anyway, with that introduction, I'll let Kurt introduce himself, and we'll get to it. Kurt.
Hi, my name's Kurt Schiebel. Some people know me as Flash. I joined the Corps in 1978 and spent 23 years on the field, 20 of those with Minnesota Brass. Special thank you, like Jim, a special thank you to the yearbook committee, Sherry Duggan, the chairman of that committee, and all her counterparts that put together the amazing 50th anniversary book, which we're using kind of as our text to define a couple interesting things that we can talk about. And that's why we have Jeff and Zora with us to talk about some of the late 60s, early 70s stuff. As you know, the Corps was founded in 1946 as the Cecil Kyle American Legion Post. We were under their tutelage for several years, actually won our first championship in the Class B American State Legion in Faribault. So the Corps started off right away winning titles. But we were very focused on Legion sponsorship. After our Cecil Kyle representative, everybody knows our affiliation with the Laidlaw Legion Post. Lee Stoffels was very involved in those early years. They didn't really have Corps directors. As you know, it was the post commander that actually ran the Corps. As the Drum Corps became more independent, we did start running things a little bit of ourselves. We maintained our affiliation with the Corps, with the Legion Post, but we became the Laidlaw Toreadors, and under the direction of Dick Mackey and Larry Woganson and Frank Lozar, names we all know and names many of us marched with, we spent some time continuing with Laidlaw. We did dabble in the brewery sponsorship. Many people know the Hams and Schmidt Indians. Minnesota Brass was actually the Grain Belt Diamonds for 1 year. And a lot of people aren't aware that we did experiment with that. We did return to the Laidlaw Corps, where Frank was our Corps director for 66, 67, and 68. And then we found ourselves in a position where we needed to really transition into more of a independent, incorporated educational group. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to have Jeff and Zora. Jeff was integral in incorporating the Corps, and Zora was a member of our first female color guard. And I'd really like to have them share with us some insights they have of the transition from Legion sponsorship to nonprofit independence. And then I'd like to hear some things from Zora about the color guard and the women joining the group. So yeah, I'd love to hear some stories you might have.
And Lowell, you were around at that time too, weren't you? Absolutely, good. Yeah.
I can do the color guard.
Perfect.
We started in '69. I believe we went to Lowell, Indiana and Harvey, Illinois, which were not real biggies. I always talked about the fact that we had no instructor. We had the whole horn line telling us what to do. Dick Buell was kind of the instrumental person into that. I think there were 6 or 8 of us that started out. Some of us had marching experience, some had color guard experience, some had drum corps experience, and some didn't have any experience. But we made our own uniforms. We marched with the Corps, and they grew, and I believe at one time we had 24 in the color guard, which was, we came up with the idea that all the junior corps had girl color guards, and we didn't have any. We thought, well, why couldn't we have one too? So we went ahead and we started it. That's about all I can tell you right now.
I see in the history book, Zora, that when you were at the Houston, that the only tick we got for during inspection was your beret, huh?
Yes. I had a beret in my hair and nobody else did, so we got marked off for that.
They were very picky back then, weren't they?
They were terrible, yes. This was in '69 when we started. I marched for 10 years. It really grew and we finally got instructors, which was really nice. As I say, Dick Buell was the one that kind of guided us through a lot of that. Corps director, Jeff was it for many, many years. And then he backed down. And then the Corps had some real financial problems, so he had to come back and solve those problems. At one point, the bus company, Lee Lines and Red Wing, wouldn't send any buses anymore because the Corps owed them so much money. So that's when Jeff stepped in and talked to Kenny Lee, which was the Lee Line person, and said, we will pay that back. And he trusted us enough that he started sending us buses again. And eventually we got back in the black, but this was a real trying time. I don't know what else I can tell you.
Right. I
Eddie,
know that.
what can you tell us about those years, the late 60s?
Who? Oh. Me?
Eddie and Lowell, got some things to say about those years? They,
I think most of us, a lot of us came from the Indians, Ham's Indians, once they folded. That's when a lot of us, Jeff and Lowell and myself and Crimmins and Tom Rowe and all those came over.
When I was marching in Fort Dodge, Tom was one of our instructors when we thought we were making the big time in the mid-60s. Tom came down and worked with our color guard. We had Corky and Mike Gordonier and Bill Pohl. They came down and we thought we were making great strides when we had people from the Twin Cities coming down to run our camps.
were Crimmins and Rowe, were they both drummers?
Crimmins was,
Okay.
and Rowe, Tommy Rowe, he was a drummer.
Oh, okay.
He left to go to the Royal Airs.
Ah,
Can we talk
And
about
Terry
this?
Bremer.
Can we talk about this financial situation? There was no board of directors. There was no organization like you have now. Jeff was core director. We had Pete Bierstrom on drums. We had Corky Whitlock on horns. We had Pete Bierstrom, and then we had Bill Vermar. And they were the ones that made the decisions, and then everybody did their own job, and away we went. That finances, we had no dues. Everything we earned from parades and contests went into the fund. And then we had, you know, our beer fund and our Bonnie Newman sandwiches and all of that. But the finances, we earned our own money from parades, etc. And if we didn't have enough money in the fund, we didn't go. At one year, I don't know who was around at that time, we chartered a plane to go out to Rochester, New York for the contest. And this was real big things because we had money at that point.
Yeah, when was that? That must have been before my time, early 70s?
Oh, geez, don't ask.
74?
Again.
74 maybe?
Yeah.
Was it?
Wow, I didn't even know that. See, we're
No,
all learning today.
We all, we were a Midwest Corps. Finally, with Corky and Nancy and Jeff and I, we drove out to Erie, Pennsylvania to see what this Red Carpet Association was all about, which was kind of the middle of the stream Eastern Corps. And then we joined them and we competed with them. Then the four of us drove out to DCA to see what that was all about. And that's when we started competing with them, but it wasn't a big time thing. We had to take the steps. And the first time we were in DCA, the judge told us, you don't belong out here. And that was kind of, yeah, the judge told us right on the field. I don't know who he told, but he said we didn't belong there. And so
You don't belong there. You don't belong there because you weren't from there, or they didn't think the Corps was good enough to be there?
they didn't think we should join their Eastern clique.
Okay. So I have a question for Jeff. When you were still under the sponsorship of the Legion, did you still have some autonomy to run the Corps? Or did they try to pull the strings?
No, we ran it all because they didn't give us much money at all.
Okay.
So, I mean, they let us use the
rehearsal facility.
the rehearsal facility. That was about it. We never really got money from them.
And then I suppose too, as I recall, you had to have some kind of a Legion or VFW affiliation to go to those national contests.
Yes.
That's correct, and that's about what they did.
Okay.
And in those beginning years, there were some very, I'll say very nice people in the Corps who gave a lot more money. You know, we were trying to get money out of dues, which I don't know what to do. The dues are probably maybe a half a buck or something like that. But there were about 6 or 7 people that were putting in some big money so we could make those things.
Okay.
I think when I joined in 78, dues were 30 bucks.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's probably true.
I think you're right, Kurt, because I remember I was part of the group that first presented the idea of collecting dues. I remember it was at Inver Hills Junior College. We had a rehearsal out there, and I can't remember right now who else was involved in that. Of course, the Corps director. Yeah. But
Right, I think, and part of it, I think, was to legitimize non-corporate membership and complying with some statutes and things like that. Because at that time, all the dues was a membership fee. When it came time to traveling to Racine or traveling out east, the dues collector had to recollect for hotel for every trip. It wasn't until much later in the Corps that they broadly expanded the dues base to a significantly higher figure, but it was more inclusive for some of the other logistics that happened during the season.
I think Don Worden was one of the that dues committee also.
Forgot about him.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he
Possibly
was.
Don Plima too. Go ahead.
I see in the book we had 47 horns in 74. Sam
And
was one of
also,
them, right?
I was reading too that at one time the whole membership was down to 25 people. Is that right? So
That
yeah,
might have been. Go ahead.
That was about it. And when we got to that 47, that was very, very fun. And all of a sudden we could do things on that.
And the Corps ended up carrying, that's when we transitioned to the DCA years, just before I joined in 78. But those mid 70s, Ed's trying to hold up a picture there. I see that. I know the 77 contingent had a nice number of horns. I mean, that's so long ago, Roger was still playing baritone.
Yeah. What is that picture, Eddie?
You're muted, Ed.
That was at the VFW National Convention in Chicago, and I think it was 73.
That was the other one then.
Were you still drum major then, or was Jeannie?
Yeah, no, I
Okay.
was.
Mhm.
And then we went to Portland in 1970, and we went to Houston shortly thereafter.
Yeah,
Houston was where we had all the injuries.
right.
I was reading that article in the yearbook.
So Jeff, what were some of the highlights for you when you were, besides getting the buses lined up?
To tell you the truth, I can't remember too much about it.
Okay. Lowell, how about you? You date to that era, I think.
Well, first Corps I joined was the Schmidt Indians back in '59. And then we switched over to the Hams Indians, I think sometime in spring of '61. And then that kind of folded. And then Corky called me and says, why don't you come and join our Corps, the Brass Incorporated. So then I joined that and played in that up through 75, I think it was the last year I played. I had a ladder accident in '72, so I wasn't able to compete on the field, but I went down to Chicago and I sat way up in in the rafters and took a picture of the Corps, which they used for a number of years for their PR. Shows the spread of the Corps on the field. That was
You
kind of
took
cool.
that one. Okay. Yeah.
Took 5th place in Chicago in '72 at Legion Nationals. Nice.
I don't remember the place.
Was that Soldier Field?
It
Yeah,
just
but the
says
picture was
Chicago.
taken at, the picture was taken, no, it was at Northwestern University, Dyke Stadium. And then the picture I showed was from Michigan Avenue in front of the Art Institute.
Yeah, I can't remember if I took it at, I think I'd been taken it at the prelims or something.
Oh,
Can't remember which one it was at. It was the daytime, so. We went to a lot of different Legion conventions, that's for sure. Dallas, Houston, Miami, and that might have been a VFW. With the Indians, we went to Denver. We went to Portland,
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas, yeah. So,
I missed out on all the fun.
a lot of trips over to Wisconsin, the Milwaukee, Madison, to get in those competitions. So,
Right.
Kurt, I have something to say to you. You say you missed out on all the fun. It was, you didn't age in yet.
Well,
one
I'm
year we
interested in
had,
something some of you old guys could talk about a little bit is the name changes, the different names the Corps went under. How did those come about?
I was reading about the Twin Cities Amalgamated Brass Works.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. I don't think I'd ever heard that name until I read the book
Never
again.
had
I'd
at
forgotten
all.
all about that.
Yeah, Corky, and it says Terry Bremer, who I'm not familiar with Terry Bremer.
soprano
But
player.
it says
Yeah.
on the way to Lowell, they were spitballing and they came up with this super long name. And then when the announcer came up, they said, "Take it away, Brass Incorporated." And they went, "Oh, all right, that'll work." Instead of Twin Cities Amalgamated Brass Works, Inc.
But I would guess the stitching on those jackets would cost more than the jacket itself. So.
Quite possibly.
right,
They had Brass Incorporated first. And then
Yeah.
they found out there was another Corps, some other place that had that name. That's why they changed it to Minnesota Brass.
Okay. And then what about the incorporation? When I have some dim recollection that was a big deal.
Yeah, that was in '71 when Jeff was Corps director, and there were some tax benefits in order to, as we transitioned away from sponsorship, which, like Jeff said, wasn't really a whole lot of budget supporting money anyway. So instead of self-funding, like Frank and Larry and Jeff and all those guys, pulling out their credit cards over those years in the '60s and '70s, they ended up incorporating in '71. So it's not just a nickname; we're an incorporated entity, and then it created some tax options for us to do nonprofit donations and things like that. Am I close, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, my brain doesn't work very well now, and I can't remember a lot of things, but as you were talking, it brought back memories.
Good. Well, we're certainly glad that you guys were able to visit with us and help share. A lot of the things Zora said about the color guard, I was vaguely familiar with, but it's totally different hearing it from participants. And again, having Lowell and Ed as well here from that era. As we get into the second half of the show, we were talking about transitioning to, now that people like Jeff and Larry and Dick and Frank got the Corps onto some pretty solid footing. It put us into position to travel out east and to attempt to stick our foot in the DCA waters in the mid '70s. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to bring Roger on as a one of our performing members for many years, certainly back then. And I half joked about that so long ago he was still playing baritone. I do recall 79, I think, was his first soprano solo, when he literally put the baritone down and picked up a sop at some point in the show. That was my second year with the corps. But I'd like to hear kind of what Roger thinks about those mid 70s. When did you first join, Raj?
I joined in 71.
Oh, so you were around that whole time then. Nice.
So yeah, I went to I played in the Pine City Saints and the St. Paul Scouts in the early 60s. But then after a 6-year marriage that fizzled, I went to a drum beauty show in 71, and Tom Munkholm collared me and got me to join Brass Incorporated. I wasn't too impressed with the group at the time. When they did a company front, it just looked like a bunch of bellies walking in line. That was my impression. But I was a new bachelor at the time, and he said the Corps is going to Houston in 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, and so I joined for the opportunity. And I think it was a pretty darn good Corps. I was surprised by some of the music they did. They played Beer Barrel Polka and Hogan's Heroes March. But the Corps was good. And I had known Corky Whitlock from being in the St. Paul Scouts in 63 and 64, and had known the family also because I went to the same school that Corky did. So that's what got me involved. Now, it was exciting by the time we got to 1974 when we had 47 horns. I was always keeping track in my head how many horns we had in the Corps, but that stayed the largest for a long time, really until maybe almost around 1990. It wasn't until then that we had more horns. But the color guard section and the drum section was growing then too. And we did have what we kind of thought was a down year in 1976, when some of the heroes of the horn line kind of left, and we changed uniforms then we changed to a red uniform that you probably helped make, Zora, but yeah. But it still had a diagonal stripe on it. We kept with those red uniforms for about 5 years, and we were big in 77, 78, 79, and then we had
We
years
dropped
where
to
we were
like
small
30.
again. Yeah.
Yeah, 78 we had 47 horns also, and then 79 we dropped to 30 something.
Yeah.
And all our M&M instructors all plugged holes for DCA, and yeah, there was some interesting prelims drill, freelance drill going on at Hershey Field there in 79.
Yeah, in the early 70s, people like Corky and this Terry Bremer and Bill Germar, they were called floaters, and they kind of made up some of their own drill.
They were ahead of their time.
That's it. Yes.
Right. That's what happened in 78. As people joined, they would give them the contra drill, and the contras became floaters. And then they didn't have to really do much serious drillery right. They just had to have a few contras floating around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The late great Dickie Bulow was famous for writing floater drill.
Hey, Matuzaks, good to see you. Mm-hmm.
Thanks for jumping in, guys.
Sam, what can you tell us about those 70s years. It was great playing baritone with you and Bob Willie and Jerry Copy and others.
The best part about that was the playing part. I was there to play my horn. Tell me where you want me and what you want me to play was my motto. I remember the first night you came down to the rehearsal. We were over in, near the St. Mary's Hospital area in a white church, I think we were rehearsing in. You, for some reason, had a leather strap around your head like a bandana. But you were a good horn player. Going through the years, it seemed like we had for quite a while, we had a new director every 3 years. And our scores or our success rate, it seemed like, would go up and down like a roller coaster. It was always just a fun time to play, though. That's what I recall from it. I have a question for Sherry Duggan. I don't know if you have a microphone on, Sherry. I'd like to know where you got your Toreador's jacket.
Unmute. You're muted.
Well, anyway, I got mine from my older brother who was a Toreador, who asked me to come down to Minnesota Brass and play a horn. And that was in 1970. And I stuck with that until I physically couldn't do it anymore. And had 2 sons go through it and do it, and met my wife in drum corps. So that's my life, is drum and bugle corps.
And Sam, you asked me where I got my Toreador jacket. I don't remember, but I accumulated a lot of different uniform parts that are still in my basement, from Ashekos to the blue jackets to the red uniforms to color guard flags. I don't know what to do with them, but I can't throw them away. So
Yeah, you can't throw that one away for sure.
no, this is the keeper.
So I'm
Separation
thinking
Angus
maybe you
side.
got it
But we don't have
through the
those.
Legion posts, maybe with your color guards and things too.
Yeah, it was something with the 50th and somebody turned it in. So it was kind of fun because it's a cool part of our history.
One of the first pictures I have in mind is in the basement of the Laidlaw Legion Club. And they were giving away a bottle of booze that night, and Frank Lozar won it. And I think his wife said it was the first thing that the drum corps ever gave him. Worth anything.
Well,
Funny
he
but
gave so
sad
much
when you
to the
think about it.
Corps.
Ed Eischen, I remember of you wearing a red, white, and blue fancy shirt and doing the polka with Nancy Whitlock on the
Yeah.
field.
I bought the material for that in Hong Kong on one of my trips over there. And Corky's sister, Kathy, made the shirts for both myself and Jeannie.
Ed, what years were you drum major for the Corps?
Boy, I can't remember. I think I started when we all came from Hams, and I'm not sure what year Hams went down. And then I think I made it to about 78, maybe. I'm not quite sure. But then I started working for Northwest Airlines and was flying too much anyway.
Were you a drum major with Jeannie Cavett as well?
Yeah, I was before Jeannie, but then with her as well.
So that would have been 77 because Jeannie was solo drum major in 78.
Okay. I wanted to mention that you talked about the color guard with the different levels of experience. And my sister-in-law, Jan Potoff, had never marched, never done anything. And I brought her to a rehearsal one time, and she was just over the moon and decided to join the color guard. I don't know, I can't remember how long she marched, but sadly she passed away last summer. So that's one missing, another one missing.
She was the first person I ever met in Minnesota in Brass Inc. And
Really?
Jeff introduced me to Jan Potoff down at the Paper Kalmanson parking lot.
Yeah,
And that's where we were rehearsing that Wednesday night
yeah,
in July of '71.
yeah. Well, I haven't heard from, I was expecting maybe Corky or Nancy would be here today, but I'm not sure, don't see them.
As we've been talking mostly about the 70s, when we transitioned, talking about corps directors, when we did become Brass Incorporated, Dick Bulow was the corps director from 69 and 70. Then Jeff Burnham, of course, came in and was integral, bringing this corps to the next level in 71, 72, 74, and 75, with Billy G filling in 73. And Palmquist took us through the late 70s, along with an assist by Stevenson in 77. So that's the remainder of the corps directors through the 70s, which is kind of where we had kind of settled on the show as we looked into the next episode. We really want to focus on the climb of the corps, and spend some time talking about 86, our first time in making finals at DCA, and some of the challenges we had as we go through the 90s. So that's kind of what we're setting up for the second show. I still want to hear more from Roger about his transition, though, from baritone to soprano in 79, and why he made that move, or what was the motivation for switching instruments.
The motivation was Corky stopping playing with the corps, and I just thought I could be one more reliable high note player. And we had Jeff would do it sometimes, and Billy Germar, and Ross Tate was good at that too.
Right.
But Ross moved away, and I knew that Billy and Jeff were probably going to stop playing fairly soon, and I just wanted to, I knew that role needed to be filled. So I bought myself a trumpet in 1975 and played around on it. And you said by 1979, I might have played it a little bit on the field. And then in 1984, I know we're getting we're getting too far past the 1970, but in 1984, I played a song called 8 to 5, where I played a baritone solo, and then picked up a trumpet and did some screaming in the middle of it, and then went back to the baritone solo. And then about 2 years after that, I settled on soprano and trumpet. To answer your question in as many words as possible.
Because that was my, you're the only person I ever knew that I would call a screech baritone player.
I was in the baritone line with Roger, and I remember being very confused when he went to play at that time, we call it soprano. And I remember him making that transition, and I remember feeling like, well, what are we going to do in the baritone line, without Roger? So there was this uncertainty that kind of I felt. I don't know if anybody else felt it, but I certainly did. And it's funny to me.
We certainly got some great baritone players and great baritone lines. The horn instructors really developed our low brass sound over the years. But again, that didn't really happen until late 80s, 90s. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That really, we had a more well-rounded sound. I think we had a very top-heavy sound in the early 70s, although we had a couple players like Warren Roberts, who seemed to, and Tom Wills, who seemed to fill the tuba section almost all by themselves. Yeah.
Well, Roger, I remember when you and I first met, just before I got involved with the Corps, I was still at the paper, and I was helping generate the program for Drum Beauty. And so one year, I think I interviewed you for the cover story. You know, Drum Beauty, if you look at a lot of drum corps programs, they really put out a pretty nice package. It's a lot more than just a list of the corps and advertisers.
Mhm.
Well, in any case, I remember you telling me that story about going to see them on, the way you presented it to me was they were on the starting line. And all of the bellies were hanging over the starting line. We're trying to decide whether or not that constituted a false beginning or not.
You improved the story. Yeah. As is your job. That was
Well,
your
that's
job.
right.
Yeah. Mhm.
Well, listen, does anybody else want to jump in here with some
Wait.
reminiscences of the first, geez, what is that, a quarter of a century from 46, 25 years up to the 80s. Of course, looking around the crowd here, it looks like almost, with few exceptions, that's about the time most people got involved.
I'll give one funny
Sure.
memory. To my knowledge, I'm the only person that's ever responded to the Corps recruiting effort by a poster on a wall put up at a community college. And it was at White Bear Community College. And I don't know why I was there actually, but Dave Hilliard had put up a poster, and this would have been 74, I think. And actually, I think I was there because I was dating a guy named John Wasson at the time, who went on to become part of Dallas Brass and wrote March of the Blue Stars and did their show a while ago. But I saw a poster on the wall, and I recall he always talked about drum corps, and so I thought I would check it out. So Dave Hilliard picked me up because I lived northeast Minneapolis and he did too. So he picked me up and brought me to my first corps rehearsal. And I recall that it was over at one of the Legion posts off of Lake Street.
Oh, the Ballantyne,
Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah.
Lake and Linden.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was, you know, just such a young girl at the time, and complete age difference, gender, it was just all these men, and the color guard wasn't practicing that night. It was too early in the season, I think. So I really didn't know what to think. But it was because Roger was so supportive, and then, you know, Bob Willie, they put me between Roger and Bob Willie. And somehow I was able to play the music and figure out the baritone. I didn't know what I was playing. I didn't know how to play it. I didn't know what the notes sounded like. And
You were a trombone player.
I was a trombone player, right? And I remember I kind of hung with things for a while, and I think I sort of said, I'm kind of out of here. I don't think this is, you know, for me. And I ended up coming back because he just passed. Bill Klein was expecting a child at DCA weekend. And so I filled the whole Bill Klein's spot for that show. And in the subsequent years, I remember, you know, the way we did drills was you were placed in your drill by the drill writer. I can't remember, Roger's brother, Gene Simmons wrote the drill. And he would position us, he'd say, Cindy, you're right here. And then he'd move my body over like, you're right here. And then you stay here for a little bit and you raise up your arms and you just follow these two people. And they stuck me between Roger and Bob Willie. And so that's how I walked through my shows. I had no idea what I was doing. All I knew was that if I stuck out my elbow and followed them, I would be okay.
Kind of gave her a nudge just before it was time to move.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yes, Sam.
And they called them 3-man squads at that time. And
I had the same learning experience when I joined in 1970 between Dick Mackey and Larry Woganson.
Oh my God.
Oh,
And when I was meant to move, Mackie would nudge me in the elbow.
That's great.
I remember being at one show where, to be honest, I think everybody was a bit snockered, and I don't remember, maybe it was the infamous
Really?
Northfield, I don't know. But
Ah,
our three-man group just decided to go rogue. And I followed Roger and Bob Willie, and we kind of walked off the field, I think. Or we ended up way over in the end zone completely by ourselves, and nobody knew where we were going or what we were doing. And somehow we managed to turn around
memories.
and join up with the rest of the group. I guess you could do that with such a freestyle drill in those days. So it was pretty awesome to me when we started getting drill sheets with dots, and I could point to my dot and say that was me.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
As we're winding down, this has been an awesome conversation. This is exactly what we were hoping this would be. If there's anybody else out there that's muted that has any questions or would like to share any more stories from that first 25-year era, the first through the 70s of the brass, feel free to chime in.
Well, are there any other guard people besides Zora?
Excuse
Sherry.
me?
Oh, there you are. Okay. People keep moving around on my screen. So
I'm going to
my
give my,
first connection with the Twin Cities was when our color guard would come up. And I remember going to, I didn't go, but they came up to Winter Guard shows. And I remember names like the Maclay Highlanders and the Rosettes. And there was a third guard that I don't remember.
The
that,
debutantes.
yeah, the
Yeah,
Debs.
the
So
Debs.
I'm just kind of curious what the connection with those three would be with brass. Zora, is that where some of your guard members
sure.
came from?
Some of
A
them
lot.
came from there, and we wanted to enter the Winter Guard because we were all so inexperienced, and we were told we couldn't because we were seniors, and they thought we were so advanced that we couldn't compete with these young kids. That eventually they allowed us to compete because they realized we weren't as good as they thought we were.
And actually, it was Bulow that brought a lot of us down just to add to the color guard flag line, as well as we started the rifle line. We have the great picture of the 8 of us. And we all marched color guard for 10, 15 years. And it was kind of unique when we did the reunion at the state fair. The average age of the rifle line was like 58.
Well, Jeannie Cavett and Tina Cavett all came from the
Debs.
Debs, yeah.
And Mary Sullivan.
Sullivan Ruker. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, listen, this is, we're just about right on time. This has really been a great event. We weren't sure how it was going to go. We're so glad you all signed up. We're going to look at the 80s and how the Corps transitioned and how the activity transitioned. So join us the first Saturday of April. And we'll plan on doing this again. Get the word out as you can. We'll try to pump up a little bit too. Get some of the guys from that era to jump in and join us. Personally, thanks so much. We weren't sure how this was going to go. From my perspective, it's been a great success and you've all contributed to that. So thank you. It's really been fun. And I've learned a lot. The perennial outsider looking in.
Yeah,
Thank
special
you.
thanks to Jeff and Zora for sharing their time with us today, and Roger for helping us into that transition into the 70s. It's great. Excited to see Ed and Lowell here. I don't know Lowell as well as I know Ed. Lowell, oh, there he is. So yeah, that was great insight to have you guys around too. So yeah, this is cool. I can't wait till next month.
I'm
Well,
going to
we got
give a
some work to
final
do.
little thank you, and then before I go, that this activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a Minnesota State Arts Board operating support grant, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. So Minnesota Brass has received a grant, and this is part of how we're planning to use that money to help keep our fans and alumni engaged as we move forward to the future. stay tuned for the next event in April. It will be the first weekend in April. And as always, these will be recorded and you will find them either on our Facebook page or website page. And I'll turn it back to Kurt.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks again. Like I said, we're going to look into what we call the lean years of the early 80s. And then we're going to try to focus on at least 2 seasons. 86 definitely is one of them. And then the end of the show we might look at 90 or 96 as a transition. And we have some guests in mind. We haven't totally reached out yet, as Jim and I outline how the next program is going to work. And it'll basically be the same as this. It's going to be more of a conversation. We hope individuals from that era come in. We hope that individuals who are curious are able to stop by and ask questions. And my understanding is this whole History Academy idea came about that the core, there's a lot of people out there, a lot of young folk out there that just aren't familiar with the strengths and longevity of this organization. And through the History Academy and our 3 programs, we're hoping to put that back out there so people know more about Minnesota Brass and its history. So special thanks again to Jeff and Zora. Always good to see them, and Roger for assisting, and all of you for showing up today. So thank you.
Thank you again. Hope you all can jump in next time.
Bye.
Thank you.